Dear colleagues, dear organizers, dear Agne, it is a great pleasure and honor to be here then today with you. This topic, roots, the causes that make our literature, make us. This is like close to my heart. So I want to start then with a quote by Anne Michelsen, and then we will go into the topics. If one buries what has happened before and does not reflect on it, the buried past might start secretly moving itself and manipulating the person. I believe that if a person wants to be the master of their own individual life, they have to review their dark chambers, not because of the principle, but for the freedom and self-respect. In order to be happy, one must be awake. So the background for me and for this talk is my interest in what impact does it have to have lived in the Soviet totalitarian system, and these 50 years are a long time, and they have to have some impact on our behavior, on our thinking, and I guess this has been always something that interests me, or that has probably been the reason why I've stuck with the writing of Anne Michelsen, because I think she's also looking for some of the questions, or answers for some of the questions, and maybe also showing some pathways to those. But what I'm interested today are the images that help us think and talk about remembering. So I will be focusing on thought images, but also on metaphors of remembering. So when we ask what is a thought image, then this notion is coming from German-speaking philosophy, Denkbild. And it's a poetic mode of writing, a brief snapshot in prose that stages the interaction of literary, philosophical, political, and cultural insights. This is how Gerhard Richter, in his book Thought Images, put it. This book is about Frankfurt School writers and philosophers Adorno, Theodor W. Adorno, Walter Benjamin, Ernst Bloch, and Siegfried Kracauer. But when we look into the dictionary, then it will tell us that thought image is a mental image produced by the imagination, as simple as that. But why are images important then, talking about remembering? Because remembering can be complex and also a dangerous process, especially if we talk about remembering the violent and totalitarian past. I would like to illustrate the importance of images and visual representations with a personal note, also connected to Vilnius. Last summer, I had the pleasure to visit the exhibition Vilnius Poker at Mo Museum that was dedicated to 700th anniversary of Vilnius city. This exhibition took Ricardas Gavelis' book, Vilnius Poker, that we are going to hear later today, as I know. This took this book as a thread for the exhibition, and it guided the viewer through the mental landscapes of the Soviet past. It was absolutely stunning exhibition in a good way, and I have not experienced anything like this before or later as well. I was so kind of fascinated about it, so I wrote also a short article about it in the newspaper. And I felt, and you know, I'm born in 1980, so still kind of at the edge or at the end of the Soviet era. But I felt that this exhibition gave me a glimpse into the mental landscape of the Soviet era, of how it must have felt, the fears, the anxieties, the craziness, also the beauty and living in extremes. And the river Neris as a metaphor of remembering and time passing was an important part of this exhibition and also important part of Gavalis' book, as I know. And I have also good news. As you can see on the slide, Vilnius Poker is also being published in Estonian at the end of this month already. Indrek Mustimets, who also visited this exhibition, was so excited or so impressed that he took the task to get the book translated into Estonian, and in the translation of Tiiu Sandrak it will then also appear. But the plan for today is to walk you through different thought images connected to remembering and to the role of the one who remembers. I will mainly base this talk on my book, Excavation and Memory, Thought Images of Memory Work and Moral Witnessing in Ene Mihkelson and Krista Wolf's prose. The book is written and published in German and later also Estonian version of this, but I've never spoken about it in English, so in that sense it was all new to me, and also some new discoveries or rediscoveries for myself as well. But this book is exploring then the philosophical potential of Ene Mihkelson's and Krista Wolf's novels and putting them into the dialogue with Walter Benjamin's philosophy of remembering. So I hope, besides focusing on thought images, also to give you a small insight into Ene Mihkelson's poetic thinking. And I will be quoting, I will be quoting on out of four books today. So the poetry book that also exists in Lithuanian, thanks to Agne. Then the novel Plague Grave, novel The Sleep of Ahasver, and the short story collection The Birthday of the Death. And these are neither in English nor in Lithuanian or any other languages yet, except Plague Grave is in Finnish, yes. And then I will be also talking about Walter Benjamin and his two texts, Excavation and Memory, and the thesis on the philosophy of history. And I will make references to Krista Wolf's novels. One of them, City of Angels, is also available in Lithuanian, I checked. Lucky you, not in Estonian. And also I will quote also, or make a reference to Bulgarian writer Georgi Gospodinov's novel, The Physics of Sorrow. Again, you have it also in Lithuanian, not in Estonian language. So this is how we will move today. And preparing for this talk actually was really a pleasant journey for me back to the topics that I have and continue to be passionate about. So thank you again for giving me this opportunity to go back to these topics. But before we're gonna jump in, and it's gonna be a journey, and I hope I'm not gonna lose you on that journey. I want you to invite to close your eyes. To close your eyes for a second. Close your eyes and imagine. How would remembering look like? This remembering, what you see, do you see anything? Is it abstract? Or are there any objects? If you yourself would be in this remembering, what you're seeing, you, the one who remembers, how would you look like? So now I invite you to come back. I hope everyone had some sort of an image or images, and try to now store it in your head, in your mental storage, and perhaps keep it also in mind when we're going through this journey now, through those images that I'm going to be quoting and telling you about. We will start now with Walter Benjamin. You could say also Benjamin, but since I'm coming from the German background, I kind of prefer Walter Benjamin. So we will start with Walter Benjamin, a short text, Excavation and Memory, Ausgraben und Erinnern. This text also gave the title from my own book. And this thought image, how it's been described, actually never was written as a separate thought image or separate text. So you can see on the right the manuscript of Benjamin, and actually the text itself starts in the bottom of this page, or the second half of this page. And it's really short text, but a dense text. And I will read you the beginning of it, not all of it. It claims, language has unmistakably made plain that memory is not an instrument for exploring the past, but rather a medium. It is the medium of that which is experienced, Benjamin says. Benjamin compares here the one who remembers with an archaeologist, and memory with earth where ancient cities lie buried. So memory work in this thought image is the work of excavation. And what is excavated is not just memories in the meaning of what had happened, but also in the meaning of what were the circumstances of what happened, as well as the feelings connected to it. So remembering as something that can be compared and elaborated by examining the work of an archaeologist is quite widespread image, and also the conference today actually draws on this image while talking about roots and addressing memory as earth and soil where our roots lie. And here I would like to offer you also a slightly different image of remembering, coming now from the work of Enne Michelsen, from her novel Plague Grave. There we find a thought image of remembering as polar exploring. We are polar explorers in Estonia, the only ones and the last, because we follow the traces of real and not mediated events. We give in to the pressure of everyday life. When we give in to the pressure of everyday life, the events split out of sentences, and the astonished Kata, the aunt of the narrator, Kata says, "How was it? Was it really like that? Wait a minute, I'll go through this passage again." This means that Kata thinks about where she was when this or that event took place, whether she was looking for the event in the right place. Once the place is found, time comes into play. Sometimes it is the other way around. Time points to the place. But restoring and achieving the feeling of their former connection and their being attuned to another is absolutely necessary. Only then does the event begin to give a sign of itself. So in this image, the land of remembering is frozen. It is possibly also unexplored, and the narrator with her aunt the Kata, is potentially the only and the last one to set out to explore. In Michelson's other novel, The Sleep of Ahasver, we encounter the image of melting into the remembering and the pain connected to this melting process. There, Anna Michelson speaks of awakening into memory. There is an imaginary of what it would be like to be frozen and lie in a glacier in the mountains, iced. The narrator asks, what would happen to the soul? Would it freeze similarly to the body or not? She concludes that the pain of the frozen body melting would be intolerable, like returning from the dead, and this would be similar to awakening into memory. Earlier in the novel, we also find a sentence: it is not difficult at all to be a frozen stone. The pain of melting is what drives one insane. So when we return to Benjamin's excavation and memory, then it is interesting to note that actually this is also how I became aware of this text, of this Benjamin text, that the German writer Christa Wolf has chosen one sentence from this excavation and memory as a motto of her last novel, City of Angels, or The Overcoat of Dr. Freud. So the motto is, so for authentic memories, it is far less important that the investigator report on them than he mark quite precisely the site where he gained possession of these memories. According to this paragraph, it is important not only to give an account what was remembered, the circumstances of what happened, thus to give a report, but also the surrounding of it, potentially meaning giving also a report of the feelings connected to the memories or the feelings connected to the remembering process. And this is what also Christa Wolf's novel does. It does not only remember, but researches the surrounding and circumstances of what is remembered and the feelings connected to this process. This novel, City of Angels, confronts the East German past and the fact that the narrator cannot find one important memory, namely, having met the representatives of state security, later Stasi, and written a report about a colleague. But the novel also asks how it is possible to explain someone in the US, for example, how did it feel to live in East Germany, in DDR? Also, the novel is an account of what happened to someone, how it must have felt while there was a public, let's say, witch hunt on them. So when Christa Wolf is reflecting in City of Angels, so the title comes because it takes place in Los Angeles. When she's reflecting on the work of remembering, then she uses the phrase of climbing into the shaft. So, like going down into the shaft. And this is also a reference to her previous novel, Patterns of Childhood, published 1976, and is dedicated to addressing the Nazi past, basically. But additionally to this climbing into the shaft, we also find an expression falling through the layers of soil. while climbing into the shaft is a conscious decision, then falling through the layers of time is accidental. It is unexpected. It happens when one does not expect it, when one is not prepared for it. This again, this falling through layers of time, has, in my view, strong affinity with Ene Michelson's image of remembering as a result of a short circuit. Literary scholar Enneken Lanes has described the short circuit as the metaphor for Ene Michelson's remembering practice in her novel The Sleep of Ahasver. And also, Jaak Domberg has shown the affinities of Michelson's short circuit with Walter Benjamin's notion of the monad. But in Benjamin's monad, Domberg says, the present event is not merged with the actual past event in its former positive presence, but with the past event as one part of the unity of failed possibilities that coexist with the present. It could be potentially understood as something similar to the reoccurring of traumatic experiences. Traumatic events as the failed possibilities of the past that are resurrected in some way if there is a trigger in the present that connects to them. But Michelson extends the notion of short circuit. In her work, the memory of the failed possibilities extends also beyond the boundaries of one personal physical memory. There is a scene in the novel Plague-Grave where the narrator tells Aunt Kata about a hallucination that she has seen, a razzia in the middle of a field where there actually was nothing. The aunt reassures her that in the same place there was a razzia on her parents, and the parents merely escaped. The narrator then concludes and asks, the parents then, their desperate wish to escape, stayed in the air and waited for me. When a person with a similar nerve combination appeared, then their spirits resonated. So something, a memory, but unlikely her own memory, from the past was in the air, and through a trigger, the same place, the presence was connected to the past event. A short circuit in Michelson's sense took place. An image appeared in front of her. In Michelson's earlier novel, The Sleep of Ahasver, the narrator reflects, I guess I will never know whether it is the hot blood that runs through my veins or a perception connected by the short-circuiting of the mysterious human brain, which creates communion with everything that has ever been or will be on this earth. After all, memory is first of all a feeling, which only becomes aware of itself through naming. Rereading Ene Michelson's short philosophical essay, Po River, that was published in this the birthday of the death in the short story collection, 96, I think. I was stunned how the philosophical stance of the later novel, The Sleep of Ahasver, that is rightly named as one of the most brilliant but also complex novels of Estonian post-war literature, how this philosophical stance that we encounter in the later novel is present in a concentrated form in this short story Poor River. I would also call it thought image, this story. In this essay, the narrator is comparing herself with the river Po that flows through northern Italy, and at different times of a year, it is overfloated from different sides of the river, kind of like as if memories from different sides flow in and overflowed. Poor River then tells how the narrator is unable to remember the landscapes that she walked through as a young girl, as a 10 and 11-year-old. The explanation she finds 40 years later is that she was too focused on her internal world, internal feelings, and this prohibited her to become aware of the external of the landscape. She concludes, "I was afraid, not knowing that I was afraid, and here lies the important difference between the wanderer of that time and the reminiscer of today." She writes, "The authentic rememberer is like anxiety crushing the inner, anticipation, fear, or looseness, and only the carefree wanderer will pay attention to all without knowing, as I did not know anything about the fearful journeys of childhood." Anna Mikkelsen draws attention to the emotional setting of remembering. Similarly to Walter Benjamin, who states in Excavation and Memory that genuine memory must therefore yield an image of the person who remembers. In the same way, a good archaeological report not only informs us about the strata from which its findings originate, but it also gives an account of the strata which had to be broken through. For me, the similarity of understanding the role of the authentic rememberer or the genuine memory was something that caught my eye here. But now we would leave the thought image of remembering and focus on the image of the one who remembers. And we will again start with Walter Benjamin and his famous and often used image of the angel of history that he creates in the 9th thesis of the text called Thesis of the Philosophy of History, also known sometimes on the concept of history. So Benjamin draws here on Paul Klee's monoprint, Angelus Novus, which you can see, and also on one poem by Gerhard Scholem. And he writes, "A Klee painting named Angelus Novus shows an angel looking as though he is about to move away from something he is fixedly contemplating. His eyes are staring, his mouth is open, his wings are spread. This is how one pictures the angel of history. His face is tuned towards the past, where we perceive a chain of events. He sees one single catastrophe which keeps piling wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. The angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, and make whole what has been smashed. But a storm is blowing in from paradise. It has caught in his wings with such a violence that the angel can no longer close them. The storm irresistibly propels him into the future to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. This storm is what we call progress." Just in form of a remark, Christa Wolf's earlier mentioned novel City of Angels uses also this image to have a discussion about whether and why people turn into monsters. In a dialogue between the narrator and his friend Peter Gutmann, a philosopher who has some affinities to Walter Benjamin, we find again the angel of history who is moving towards to the future, backwards, with his back turned towards future and facing the past. So he does it blindly. And here Peter Gutmann says, a storm is blowing from paradise. It pushes the angel of history backwards ahead of it, but it does not turn him into a monster. This angel, in Christa Wolf's interpretation, is blind, but he's blind to the future horrors. What the image of the angel of history, who actually does not look like an angel at all, makes us think is the horrendousness of the history, the impact of the past. The fact that one, in this case the angel of history, or the image of the one who remembers, is forced to see the horrors of the past and yet is unable to fix anything. Therefore, here lies the difficulty and heaviness of remembering. Ene Michelsen uses in the novel Playgrave the metaphor of the eclipse. So starting with an external solar eclipse, the eclipse turns into something located within the narrator at the end of the novel. While in the beginning of the novel, the difficulty of remembering is referred to different understanding of the past within Estonian society, the different perceptions of the Second World War that we as Eastern Europeans know is called the Great Patriotic War in Russian. Playgrave starts with the disputes around a memorial, Alyosha or the Bronze Soldier, a memorial to Soviet soldiers that in the spring of 2006 was still located in the center of Tallinn city, but by the premiere of the book in May 2007 had been already removed from its original place and placed to the cemetery. At the end of the novel, the narrator is in Vienna, where the author Ene Michelsen received the European Prize in May 2006. And in Vienna, the narrator feels the inability to translate and explain the different voices and perception within herself to the Western Europeans. In Vienna, I perceived myself as an eclipse of light and suddenly wanted to scream. The eclipse was within me and it was unable to get out. In a way, the narrator, who had been the hunter of her own, but also foremost her aunt Kata's hidden memories, becomes the hunted one and is haunted by the past. The eclipse turns into herself. She is part of the difficulty to remember. The eclipse and the topic of being haunted brings us back to the figures and images of Michelsen's novel titles. So Playgrave stands for the poison that lies in the bottom of the hidden memories and indicates the danger of memory work. We find statements like, I was both a betrayed child and a listener absorbing ever larger doses of poison. Or on another place, I must listen to you. It is my oath and duty. I would have answered. When my parents did not flee over land and seas, then someone has to look into the depth of the poisoned chalice, eyes wide open, even if there is no hope of healing. The title of The Sleep of Ahasver refers to the legend of the eternal Jew, the wandering Jew, Ahasver. According to the legend, Ahasver is a mythical immortal man whose legend began to spread in Europe in the 13th century. In the original legend, he was a Jew who taunted Jesus on the way to the crucifixion and was then cursed to walk on earth until the second coming of Jesus. So he was both cursed, but also he was given an assignment to spread the word of Christ. So Ahasver represents both being cursed, but also being a chosen one. And I can't help but noticing that the notion of wandering that we saw also in the story with the little girl, the Po River story, there we're encountering a wandering young girl who does not remember the landscapes, but rather the mindscapes. The image of being cursed while facing and addressing the Soviet past, both private and societal, also brings to mind another European writer whose work today is widely translated, Georgy Gospodinov, and his novel The Physics of Sorrow. So here Gospodinov is using a myth of the Minotaur as the organizing image for the book. And many of the translation, or many of the covers of the translation, as well as the Lithuanian one, uses this image of Minotaur. So Minotaur is a mythical creature portrayed during classical antiquity with the head and tail of a bull and the body of a man. As an unnatural offspring of a woman and a beast, the Minotaur was held hidden in the gigantic labyrinth. In Gospodinov's novel, the narrator constructs a labyrinth of stories about his family, jumping from era to era, from viewpoint to viewpoint, and exploring the mindset of Eastern Europeans. So Minotaur is somebody who has been hidden or is hidden in a cellar because he's strange and alien. And in the poetry book Tower, we find one section that is titled Kaspar Hauser. And Kaspar Hauser was a German youth from the beginning of 19th century who claimed to have grown up in a total isolation of a darkened cell. According to Hauser's story, he only received dry bread and water next to his bed each morning, and until a certain age he had never seen another living person. Shortly before his release, he was taught to write his own name, stand and walk. So again, we encounter somebody strange and different. And all these images, Ahasver, Minotaur, Kaspar Hauser, contain some feeling of being alienated or not expected because of their strangeness. Interestingly, the last book about Ene Michelsson's life, published only 4 weeks ago, is titled Tetrahedron in the Pasture. So basically a geometrical figure in a field for cows. And you know, this image of course generates a feeling of being displaced, being different, being alien, and still being alien, being given or have inherited a task of remembering, like Ahasver, is both a duty and a possibility. When we return to Ene Michelsson's word from the beginning, if one buries what has happened before and does not reflect on it, the buried past might start secretly moving itself and manipulating the person. I believe that if a person wants to be a master of their own individual life, they have to review their dark chambers, not because of the principle, but for the freedom and self-respect. In order to be happy, one must be awake. So working through the past is needed for freedom and self-respect. It is a question of ethics. Thought images, the poetic modes of writing, brief yet dense snapshots in prose with accompanying visual images that have both literary and philosophical quality can help us think about the complexity and the moral pitfalls of remembering. For me, Ene Michelsen is not only a writer, but also a brilliant, if not the easiest, but still brilliant thinker. But so is Walter Benjamin, and in his lifetime he mainly wrote literary critics, and he was known as a literary scholar. Only later we know him as a philosopher. And to conclude, you all imagined something earlier, an image of remembering, and I would be now very curious to hear some of the images, and thank you so much for coming with me on this journey today.